Hi guys, Olive here today to talk to you about the best books I've read so far in 2020. The standard disclaimer applies. These aren't necessarily books that were published in 2020. They are simply books that I have read in 2020. Both fiction and nonfiction are featured in this list. I have selected 5 of each and I have ranked them. I'll be speaking about them in this video in descending order. So starting with my least favorite, working my way up to my most favorite. So my 5th favorite nonfiction book so far this year is How to Be a Good Creature by Cy Montgomery. This is a beautiful little essay collection by the author of one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books, The Soul of an Octopus. Each one of the essays in this collection talks about a different animal that the author encountered at different points in her life. Some of them were pets. Some of them were animals that she encountered in the wild as she was traveling. Cy Montgomery writes with so much heart. I think any animal lover will enjoy this book just as much as I did. My 5th favorite fiction book so far this year is one I read very early on in the year. It is The Lonely Hearts Hotel by Heather O'Neill. This is a very, very dark tale of 2 orphans living in Depression-era Montreal. They are each performers and they use their skills to help them navigate their way through some very bleak things. Allow me to reiterate how dark this book is. Do not let the romantic moonlit cover fool you. This book is extremely gritty. Because of that, I think, or rather, I know this book will not be for everyone, but I very much felt that that dark backdrop was a statement. And just because this book is dark definitely does not mean that it is not enchanting. I was under this book's spell the entire way through. I have never read anything quite like this. The number 4 nonfiction spot belongs to Sea People by Christina Thompson. This is a book I read as part of my readings for the BookTube Prize. This is a book all about Polynesia, or rather the peoples of Polynesia. It discusses how the populations may have first found their way to these islands, and then it talks about the history of the people and their culture. All of the information in this book was so incredibly fascinating, and the author is coming from a very genuine place. She's not trying to place the peoples of Polynesia under a microscope. She's not trying to make them a subject to be studied. And she's also not trying to pretend that their history started when the Europeans arrived. It's really great research presented in an amazing way, with a sense of heartfelt curiosity at the center of it. It's just fantastic. My 4th fiction favorite so far this year is Magpie Murders by Anthony Horowitz. I read this one for March Mystery Madness this year, and I learned during that month that this one is well deserving of all the hype surrounding it. This is a book inside of a book. It tells 2 different mystery stories almost simultaneously. It starts off when we are reading through a manuscript of what will be the final book in a very popular mystery series, but when that manuscript abruptly cuts off, we go on a journey with a woman who works at the publisher of these mysteries to find out what the deal is with those missing pages. This was not only plotted just to perfection, but the execution is nearly flawless. I just could not stop reading this one. I have not enjoyed a mystery so much since the early books in Tana French's Dublin Murder Squad series. And at number 3 for nonfiction is another book I read for the BookTube Prize. It is Parklands by Dave Cullen. This book doesn't just discuss the 2018 shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, but it mainly covers the March for Our Lives movement that was created and led by students in response to that shooting. I thought this was such a tremendous work. The author was present at a lot of the events that he writes about. He came to know a lot of the students and he writes about all of this with such finesse. I am still so disappointed this one isn't still in the running for the Nonfiction BookTube Prize. And in the number 3 spot for fiction is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. This is another one I read very early on this year. January was such a good reading month for me. This is another one that was really hyped. It is all about a young Black woman who works as a nanny for a white family in Philadelphia. The whole book starts off with an incident that happens in a grocery store. This nanny and a friend of hers are keeping one of the children she nannies for entertained in a grocery store late at night because of legitimate reasons. reasons. But a white woman in the store assumes something untoward is going on and alerts a security officer. The resulting verbal altercation that happens between those two young women and the security guard in the grocery store is recorded by a bystander, and that video is Chekhov's gun as we go through the book, and we learn more about the nanny, about the woman she works for, but also about that guy who recorded the video. I thought this whole book was such an interesting examination of the roles that other people want to force us into to play within their lives. And simultaneously, it also definitely does look at the everyday impacts of racial attitudes buried deep in the recesses of our minds. This book is not only thought-provoking and extremely relevant, but it is also very well done. It was just an enjoyable read. And also, as a former nanny myself, I had that personal connection with it as well. Number 2 for nonfiction is one that I recently reviewed. It is The Story of More by Hope Jahren. I had no idea this one was going to be released this year, but the moment I found out the author of Lab Girl, another one of my nonfiction favorites, was going to be releasing another book, I jumped on it. This book aims to tell the true story of how humans have come to consume more of basically everything over the past half century. But by making it a story rather than just a list of facts, it feels deeply personal and it feels deeply sad, which I very much feel primes the reader to want to make some of the changes that she outlines in this book. If you would like to hear more about this one, I will link my review for you down in the description box below, but also up in the cards. Now, my number 2 spot for fiction was extremely tricky to pick because the books at number 1 and number 2 for fiction so far this year are nearly interchangeable. I adored both of them basically equally, but I finally caved and I put Writers and Lovers by Lily King in the number 2 spot. This is the story of a 30-something writer living in Boston in the 1990s. She is trying to write her first book, but she's waiting tables to support herself. She's in a ton of debt. She's being swallowed by grief. And then she starts seeing 2 different guys who offer her 2 very different things, and she knows she will have to eventually decide between them. This book is lighter on plot and it is extremely nuanced. I'm finding that's kind of Lily King's way of writing, and if that's not your thing, then this probably won't be for you, but I absolutely adored this. I thought it was gorgeous. I gave it a rave in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I do some freelance reviewing. I will link that review down below if you'd like to read it. My number 1 favorite nonfiction book so far in 2020 is The Salt Path by Raynor Winn. This is a travel/grief memoir in which the author and her husband, fresh off of losing their family home and fresh off of finding out that her husband had a terminal illness, started walking the Southwest Coast Path. In this book, the author describes her slow and difficult process of coming to terms with all of the awful things that had been happening to them, while she's taking us through the day-to-day challenges of the walk itself. This book is so heartfelt and emotional, while it effortlessly creates a really strong sense of atmosphere, which is so important to me in the books I read. This one is a real winner, and I'm very glad I finally read it. And then, since I put Writers and Lovers in spot number 2, that means my favorite work of fiction so far in 2020 is The Signature of All Things by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is a gorgeous work of historical fiction that tells the entire life story of a botanist who was born in Philadelphia at the turn of the 19th century. This botanist is a fascinating, but at times frustrating character. She's intensely dedicated to her lifelong study of mosses, but she also really struggles with her interpersonal relationships with both family and friends. She makes some really big mistakes. There is so much beauty and also so much heartbreak in her story. I could not get enough of this book. I actually did a full review of it. If you would like to watch it, I will link it for you down below and up in the cards. So those are the books that have impressed me the most in the first half of the year. It's always really interesting to see if my top books right now maintain their positions in my final year-end list, or if books I read in the second half of the year will claim their spots. I guess we'll see. As always, if you've read any of these books, if you've heard of any of these books, or if you are now interested in any of them after seeing them in this video, you can let me know in the comment section below. Any more general comments or questions can go there as well. Or if you would prefer to find me somewhere other than YouTube, I am on a variety of different places on social media, and the links to all of my profiles will be in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.